For this video, we're going to continue our work with one-step equations. So we've practiced one-step equations with adding and subtracting, and now we're going to take a look at one-step equations for multiplying and dividing. So let's put our title of our notes, one-step equations. And then you can put today's date in the top corner, either right there or right there. Either space doesn't matter. So just a quick review from yesterday. Here were our steps that we were using to solve one-step equations. We worked on locating the variable, figuring out the operation connected to the variable, using inverse operations, and then checking our answers. So today we're just going to continue on with those same steps, and we're going to use them and apply them to multiplication and division problems. So our one-step equations here, we'll write down some examples. Let's say I gave you the problem 5x equals 20. When you have one-step equations and you have equations that look like this, remember when we have a number right next to a letter, that means multiply. So this is saying what number times 5 gives me 20. So I want to undo the operation here, which is multiplication. So the undo of multiplication is division. So the way I show that is I draw a fraction line underneath each side of the equation. So I'm going to undo this by dividing both sides of these equations by 5. So 5 divided by 5 is 1, so this reduces away because 1 times anything is always that value, so 1 times x is still x. So I get x equals, and then 20 divided by 5 is 4. So my solution there is x equals 4. Let's try another example. Let's say I gave you negative numbers. Negative 64 equals negative 8n. So again, we always follow our steps. We locate the variable. So there's the variable n. And we want to figure out the operation that's connected to it. So this one's tricky because it looks like you're subtracting 8, but really this is multiplying by negative 8 because these numbers, this number and this letter are right next to each other. This is the coefficient of n. So it's going to be negative 8 times n. So some number times negative 8 gives me negative 64. So to undo that, I divide both sides by negative 8. So negative 64 divided by negative 8 is positive 8. So I can go back and check that this answer works. If I plug in 8 for n, negative 8 times 8 is negative 64. Same thing on this problem. If I go back and plug in 4, 5 times 4 is 20. So the common mistakes you got to look out for when you're doing these problems, dividing by a negative. Make sure you remember that a negative divided by a negative is a positive. And then when you plug your answers back in, just make sure you're plugging them in and then multiplying. So 8 times negative 8 is negative 64. The other types of problems you're going to see are ones that involve division. So let's look at a division problem. Here we're going to take m divided by 2 and make it equal to 10. So the undo of division is multiplication. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to multiply both sides by 2. And the way you write that is you write times the dot and 2. So 2 times this value over here where it's over 2, these actually reduce away because this becomes 2m over 2, which we already know from above that the number divided by itself is 1. So it leaves me with m equal to 10 times 2 is 20. And I can check that. I can plug in 20 for m. 20 divided by 2 is 10. So I know my answer is correct there. So when you have division, you you undo it by multiplying both sides by that value. Let's look at another example. 2 equals negative r over 8. So again, we locate the variable. So the variable is on the right-hand side this time, and it's being divided by 8. But not only is it being divided by 8, there's a negative sign over here that I need to take care of as well. So to do the inverse of this operation, I have to multiply both sides by negative 8. So when I multiply this by negative 8, this is going to reduce with this denominator, and the negative times the negative will become a positive. So I have this value equal to r. And then now negative 8 times 2 is negative 16. And I can check that because if I plug in negative 16 divided by 8 is negative 2. And then so a negative times a negative is a positive, so that's where positive 2 comes from. Last example. Negative k equals 10. All right, for this problem, I just want the k all by itself. So there's a negative in front of there. So really remember what that means. When you have a number or a negative directly in front of a letter, you can put the 1 there. So it's negative 1k. So to simplify this, I would have to divide both sides by negative 1. So 10 divided by negative 1 is negative 10. Because negative 1 times negative 10 is positive 10. So now we should be good with one-step equations. We practice solving, adding, and subtracting by undoing those equations, and now we know how to undo multiplying and dividing. So we should be able to move on to the two-step equations once we get some practice with all 4 forms of the problems. Good luck.